we are going to make some bread from scratch. I do not use a bread maker. I use my hands, spoon, whisk. This is, you'll need 3 cups of flour, some salt, some sugar, yeast, some olive oil, any kind of oil will work, and extra flour for when you go to knead your bread. You'll need another bowl once you're done kneading. I go ahead and do mine. It's got oil inside it. And then you'll need some place to knead your bread. Most people do it on their counter. I don't like to clean that up. So I got the biggest bowl I could possibly find, and we'll knead it in there. So the first thing you do, we need 12 ounces of hot water. Not super hot, not lukewarm. It needs to be like bath water. Like if you touch it, it's not gonna burn you, but it'll be warm because you need to activate your yeast. Because if your yeast doesn't work, then you'll have to start over with the yeast. And you don't wanna dump your yeast in your flour if it doesn't activate first, because that's a pain in the behind. So I'm waiting for my water to heat. Got 12 ounces of water. In here is a tablespoon of sugar. I'm going to put that in and whisk it around to dissolve it a little bit. I have a little tiny bit of leftover honey. I'm going to put it in there just because I like to. There's not a whole lot, and I just don't want to waste it. This is a good way to use it up. Okay. So now I'm going to stir that a little bit. This is active dry yeast. I'm going to need 2 teaspoons of this. If you used instant, you wouldn't, it would work, but it wouldn't rise as the way I like it to rise. So I use this one. It makes the bread softer too, to use this one. Because you want that rise time, because that'll make your bread soft and have a good crumb. All right, so now we gotta let this dissolve, and then we're gonna let it sit for about 5 minutes, 5 or 6 minutes. I'm gonna dissolve it, and then we're gonna pause and come back once it's ready. So our yeast has been blooming for about 5 minutes. This is, I mean, it's not as foamy as I like it to super duper be because the water was not as hot as it needed to be, but it's gonna work. So we know it's gonna work. Now's the time we put in some salt. We're gonna put into the flour. You wanna put at least a teaspoon of salt. This is kosher salt, it's my favorite, I like it. We're gonna mix it up. Let that yeast keep blooming for a minute. I'll mix the salt just into the flour so it's incorporated. And now into your yeast, we want to do 3 tablespoons of oil. Any kind of oil. I'm using olive oil. It's extra virgin. 2 and 3. Okay. Now we've got our oil and our yeast, and I'm just going to put it into the flour. Get all that yeast out of there. Now, this is going to look weird. I understand that, but I like to use the end of the handle on my spoon. Now, if you want to do this recipe, I make cinnamon rolls with it sometimes. You just put a little bit more sugar, and then you sweeten it in the filling a little more, or make your icing super sweet. It'll work. You just roll it out instead of baking it like a loaf. But you want to get all that flour stirred and incorporated there, just hydrated basically. And then where you can work it. There's still flour on the bottom of that, on the bottom of my bowl. Okay, so that's what it looks like right now. So I'm gonna get my big bowl. You want to put half of, this is just a cup of extra flour. I'm gonna put half of it in the bowl, some of it on my hand. And we're gonna scrape the dough out into this bowl, just because I'm lazy and I don't like to clean. I don't like to clean the counter. That's kind of what it ought to look like. Oops. Slippery. Well, try not to break your bowl. It happens. So now we need to get the rest of our flour and put it on your hand and on top. You might need more. I start with a cup every time and then I work my way. So then you're gonna work your flour. We're gonna work that extra flour into the dough until the dough is steady. I don't know how to describe that, until it comes together and it's smooth, but it's not sticky. And you basically can't over knead. Like, I used to do it in the stand mixer and I overworked it every time in the stand mixer. So then I started just doing it by hand, because you really can't overwork it unless you put too much flour. But that's hard to do at this stage because the dough is so wet. You just pick it, I usually fold it and then press with my hand, the heel of my hand. Just keep folding. Usually for about 5 to 8 minutes. We'll get it done. So I'm gonna keep kneading. And we'll come back, show you what it looks like when it's ready to be put in the bowl. Okay. So I've been kneading for about 6 or 7, 8 minutes maybe. Benji stopped filming and took Ozzy outside, so that's probably usually about how long it takes him. So this is what it should look like now. See, it's still a little sticky, but it's not sticking to my hands. And so now I'm just making a ball with it, because you wanna seal the underneath so that it'll rise. You want it to rise twice its size. And see, when I push on it, it's starting to bounce back. That's how you know it's ready to rise. So I've got this bowl over here with the oil in it. It's just extra virgin olive oil, just like we put in the bread. I'm gonna put it down in it and roll it around, turn it over, roll it around, and then roll it back over. And now we're gonna cover that with saran wrap and let it sit for about 3 hours and let it rise. You want it to rise double its size. I did end up using a little more flour than I said, so I ended up using about 1.5 cups extra to get it kneaded and the right texture. You just never know. It depends on the day, how hot it is in your house, how wet the flour is. So just gotta go with that. Okay, so had my bread dough in this bowl, covered in a warm, dry place away from the air conditioner vent. It's been about 3 hours. We went for a walk. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna uncover it. And you punch it down. And it'll deflate all that gas out of the bread. And then we're gonna, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna split this bread up. I'm gonna take half of this dough and put it in a container to use for hamburger buns tomorrow. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna knead it a little bit more. I got a little bit of flour that I'm putting down on some parchment paper. You don't do a lot. It doesn't need a lot of flour. I put too much right there. Because we're gonna knead it just a little bit more, because you want it to be a little bit less sticky just now. And then I'm gonna roll it in a ball, kind of. And then I don't really like to roll it out. You can, and then just kind of roll it up. But I don't like to do that. Now this is gonna make a tiny loaf, but there's only 2 of us here, so it won't really matter. If we used all of it, it would make a big loaf, and it would rise again. So I've got my pan that's not been sprayed with anything. I'm just gonna put some cooking spray in it. in my pan. And then I just put it in there and flatten it because it's going to rise again. So then you're going to sit it while your oven's preheating. I'm going to put the oven at 350 and let it preheat for about, it takes about 20 minutes for it to preheat. And we'll put, we're going to put this plastic wrap back over it and let it sit next to the oven while it's preheating and let it rise for about 20 more minutes again. And then we'll put it in the oven. So we're going to let it rise a little bit. Okay, so we let our bread rise for a few minutes. The oven's pretty much preheated. I'm going to uncover it. I'm going to take a knife and just score it a little bit. I don't even know why. I just saw somebody do that and I thought, well, okay, let's do that. I'll look it up as to why, but I don't know. Anyhow, so I'm going to put this in the oven. It's at 350 for about 25 minutes because this is smaller than the loaf I normally make. So I'm going to do 25 minutes on it and come out and see if it's done. Okay, it's been about 35 minutes. It's at 350. You want to cook it till, I always tap it and it sounds kind of hollow, so I think it's done. And so it's going to be very hot. So I'm just going to turn it out on this wire rack and let it cool, because if you leave it in the pan, the crust is going to feel kind of wet and it might get soggy and you don't want that. I don't want that. So that's our bread. I know it's not the most beautiful thing ever, but it's going to taste good.